So for those of you who remember me or have watched these events before, my name is Ryan Miller. I am the Communications Manager for the Washington Department of Ecology's Nuclear Waste Program. And this is our sixth live stream event for Let's Talk About Hanford. This event is themed A Year in Review. So I'd like to thank everybody again for joining. We have two streams going on. We have WebEx and we have Facebook. During tonight's event, we encourage you to comment, any feedback you have or any questions you have for us into the chat on both WebEx and Facebook. We have a Q&A box on WebEx that you just click on and you can input any questions you have or any comments you have about the event tonight. Same for the Facebook live stream. If you're on the Facebook live stream, you just have to hit the chat bubble and you can ask away. So for those of you who are not familiar with these events or have not attended one before, we run these events by doing first a presentation on the topic of the night, and then we'll move into a live Q&A session afterwards. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, tonight's theme is A Year in Review. We're going to start with an overview by our program manager, David Bowen, and then we're going to move into some specific presentations. We have 4 different topics on some of Ecology's work at Hanford in the last year or so that we're going to present on. And following that, we're going to move into the live Q&A session where we'll answer your questions that you have about the presentation or just about Ecology's recent work at Hanford or our role in Hanford cleanup. And I will clarify again that these events are typically geared towards to be a little more high level, and so we will do our best to answer your questions. If we have any questions that are a little too specific or we don't have the right subject matter expert on for, we can take your question and we can follow up with you after the show. Or alternatively, if you have any questions that are maybe better geared towards a different event, you can gear those to our email, which is hanford@ecy.wa.gov. Again, that's hanford@ecy.wa.gov. And I think with that, we can move into our presentation portion of the evening. We'll have Dana go ahead and pull up our slides. And as she's doing that, I can introduce our program manager, David Bowen.
Thank you, Ryan. And while those slides are coming up, just welcome to everybody and thanks for being with us this evening. Just a few words to start us off, as 2021 was indeed a year like no other. On top of all the work this team does, we came into the year with a new program manager, me, and operated under COVID health restrictions and a hiring freeze. We experienced several retirements, promotions, transfers, and we created some new positions. And we also navigated through a vaccine mandated Ecology, Energy, and their contractors who are wrapping theirs up right now. And all that for Ecology created a major recruitment push. We have 14 active postings right now. We have 8 more in the pipeline to be posted soon. So if you or anybody you know may be interested in working on the most complex cleanup project in the United States, I do encourage you to take a look at accesswa.gov, positions and team members. So anyway, you name it, we're looking for it. So check us out. And development of a record of decision at B and C reactor. That record of decision, or ROD, will guide cleanup of soil and groundwater along the river corridor. We partnered with EPA and DOE to resolve structural stability issues at 3 sites, which posed a risk to human health and the environment in the event of a collapse. And our program focused on processing modifications to the Hanford site-wide permit. And that was to support startup of the direct feed low activity waste treatment facility. That's kind of high profile right now, and we're excited to have treatment start on site. There were 50 modifications to the site-wide permit this year, and we also had an approval order for air permitting as well. And there's always more to do. And in 2022, planned work will include coordination with EPA, Energy, and tribal nations in the development of work plans, removal actions at the Purex complex. And 2022 is another big year for permitting, with continued modifications for the Hanford site-wide permit, water quality permit renewals, and air approval orders to support the direct feed low activity waste startup. We also be wrapping up work on the Rev 9, so revision 9 to the Hanford site-wide permit. It's a renewal of the site-wide permit. And we're going to do that to prepare the permit for public comment in 2023. And then we'll also we have other permits besides on Hanford itself. So we have the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard dangerous waste permit renewal. And we're working on the renewal for the Permafix Northwest permit as well for public comment in 2023. So with that, a lot going on. There's a lot of other administrative things going on, but I really want to highlight the projects and the accomplishments for 2021. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Teresa.
Hey, David, before we kick it to Teresa, can we, I think the first about 30 seconds of what you said was we had a little bit of some technical glitches on your end, I think, and you came up a bit garbled, but we caught most of what you said, but except for the beginning. I'm wondering if you might be able just to share the beginning part again.
Mainly in the beginning was thanking you for the introduction and welcoming everybody for this evening. And then I just kicked it into, we had just a few words to kick us off. So hopefully you heard about operating under COVID health restrictions and hiring freeze and all that.
I think that's right about where you were a bit garbled, but if you want to just restate that part, I think we'll be good to go.
Okay, so on top of the work, we came into the year with a new program manager, which was me, and the patience of the team was amazing as they got me up to speed. Really appreciate that. We operated under COVID health restrictions and a hiring freeze, at the beginning of the year, and the COVID restrictions continued. The hiring freeze was lifted. We experienced retirements, promotions, transfers, and created a lot of new positions. So also within that time frame, we navigated through a vaccine mandate at Ecology and Energy, and the contractors are finishing up their navigation through that scenario as well. So all that created the major recruitment push that I described.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, we can go ahead and kick it over to you now, Teresa, if you want to introduce yourself and share your slides.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Teresa Howell, the Plutonium Finishing Plant Project Manager for Ecology. The Plutonium Finishing Plant is commonly referred to as PFP, and the completion of the demolition there is a huge accomplishment for Hanford this past year. So PFP was among the most contaminated facilities at Hanford. There was liquid plutonium, plutonium nitrate from Hanford's reactors there that was processed into buttons that were sent to weapons productions facilities. So as you can imagine, the facility was quite contaminated. Cleanup of PFP started in October of 1996 when DOE ordered a shutdown of the production processing. At that point, nuclear materials had to be removed before demolition could occur. And these materials included plutonium uranium solids, liquids, and residues, as well as special nuclear materials called polycubes, which are plutonium-bearing polystyrene cubes and their fragments. And there were also numerous glove boxes to remove and 52 pencil tanks, which were long, thin tanks in the PRF, the Plutonium Reclamation Facility, which is the canyon at PFP. And this is a photo of a 10-ton glove box being removed from the facility. Cleanup work at PFP spanned over 2 decades. In October of 2002, the deadline was set to complete the cleanup in 2017. And this included more than 60 buildings in the complex that needed to be demolished. But we ran into a few issues along the way. In June 2017, the first of several contamination events occurred when plutonium and americium were detected outside of the work zone, including some contamination off the Hanford site and some worker uptakes. And due to these contamination events, Ecology and EPA issued a stop work order in December of 2017 so that DOE could gain back some adequate control of the demolition process and ensure that worker and public health and safety were protected. DOE proved to us over the past several years that they were able to do the work safely, and the work resumption occurred in phases in 2018 and 2019. And this past month, we were able to claim victory when we sent the last 2 boxes of plutonium contaminated debris out of the PFP area. Due to the spread of contamination and the radiological dose uptakes, there was a huge cause for concern during the whole evolution of work. However, DOE partnered closely with us throughout this process and made a lot of progress in including the regulators in their work control development and monitoring. We installed a new continuous air monitoring network, enhanced worker controls, engineering and safety oversight throughout the process. And so all around, we are so glad to see DOE complete the removal action successfully. It was a really critical piece in the mission at Hanford and a success story across the entire DOE EM complex. So now we transition into the surveillance and maintenance phase of work and the remedial actions for adjacent soil waste sites. The building slabs at PFP have been sampled and a temporary soil cover is in place. And there's a time-lapse demolition video of the facility, which is really pretty neat. And the link for that is shared in the chat, and we will share the link in the chats on Facebook and WebEx. Thank you all, and I'm going to hand this off to Ryan Miller to talk about Q&A before we go to Dan McDonald for his presentation.
Thanks, Teresa. And as Teresa said, I'm going to be sharing that PFP video link in both the Facebook and WebEx chats. And before we moved on, I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions about any of the presentations tonight that you want answered during the live Q&A, you can feel free to put them into the Q&A box on WebEx or the Facebook live stream chat, and we will ask them live. But feel free to put those messages into the chat at any time, and it doesn't have to be during the Q&A session. You can put them in now if you like. But with that, I'll kick it over to Dan for our next part.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dan McDonald. I serve as Ecology's project manager for the waste treatment plant and associated facilities. Construction certification is an important part of what we do at Ecology, and many people are involved. Dana, next slide, please. As you can see here, it's a process, actually several, and we engage in it to ensure that the WTP dangerous waste management units have been constructed in accordance with Washington Administrative Code and the Dangerous Waste Permit. There are 3 citations of note here. The first one, 12A, that's a permit condition. It says, and I quote, "The permittees may not commence treatment, storage, or disposal of dangerous waste in the new or modified portion of the TSD, that is Dangerous Waste Management Unit, subject to this permit until," and then 12B says, "The permittees have submitted to Ecology by certified mail, overnight express mail, or hand delivery, a letter signed by the permittees and a registered professional engineer stating that the TSD unit has been constructed or modified in compliance with the conditions of the permit." The last citation down there is out of the WAC itself, and it essentially says the department has inspected the modified or newly constructed facility and finds it is in compliance with the conditions of the permit. Dana, next slide, please. All right, here's what that process looks like. Down the left-hand side are the aggregate phases, if you will, of a project. Across the top are the folks or groups who are involved in this process. Now, for Ecology, we have a field engineer on site observing ongoing activities all the time. Ecology personnel conduct a review of the information provided by the permittees to ensure that everything is adequate and appropriate. Ecology either agrees with or suggests changes to the information provided. And ultimately, we provide an affirmation when all is adequate and appropriate and in compliance with the dangerous waste permit. There's a variety of activities that are involved in doing that. There are observations, there are interviews, there are document reviews, and there's a variety of combinations of those kinds of things. All of the activities mentioned are designed to be, if you will, gates through which the verification process is assured, all toward the final certification that the system or facility has been constructed or modified in compliance with the dangerous waste permit. Now, when you take a look at this flow chart, if you have an opportunity, take a detailed look at it. You'll see a variety of things that need to occur, not only sequentially, but there's a variety of things that occur concurrently as well, all of which leads us toward the right-hand bottom portion of that picture that says we certify that the system or facility has been constructed or modified in compliance with the DWP. Okay, so now you know what happens. How well did we do in 21? Well, we managed to finish 3 comprehensive certification projects. The first of which was for LAW, Low Activity Waste Facility. And that one was a big one, and it was organized into 8 sub-projects by major DWP systems. And it required the review of thousands of construction records spanning nearly 20 years. The experience gained during previous certification efforts really helped with this one because it helped us focus the verification effort through the construction records review and numerous facility inspections. In addition to the field engineer I mentioned, we have a engineering team in-house that goes out and does walkdowns and again does interviews and record reviews. So we have quite a team that goes out and takes care of this. The second certification process that was undertaken was for the EMF, Effluent Management Facility. That certainly benefited from the work that we did on the law. And in addition to that, it helped with certification inspections during active final construction and startup. And I would ask you to remember too that COVID-19 social distancing protocols were in place as well. So it was interesting to accomplish. Our third and last for 21 was the TSCR, tank side cesium removal, also known as the LAWPS. That scope included the TSCR filtration and ion exchange system, as well as hose and hose piping to and from AP tanks. In addition to that, there were waste transfer lines between AP Farm and WTP that supported DFLAW that were also looked at. We worked well with the tank operations contractor and DOE to include components within the AP Farm through construction documents and photographs, and without entry into the farm in dangerous areas for physical inspection. So that gives you an idea what certification is all about. Also gives you an idea what we were able to accomplish within the time frame in 21. With that, I'll turn it over to Eddie.
All right, thank you, Dan, for that. I serve as the waste management section manager here at the Nuclear Waste Program and work with a bunch of talented folks within this section. One of the many responsibilities within the waste management section is air permitting and compliance here at the Hanford site. If we can go to the next slide, Dana. So within this project, we have a number of dedicated engineers who issue permits for the air operating permit and ensure compliance here on site, and part of which is establishing an ambient air boundary. Applicants such as Hanford may model emissions to ensure they're meeting the requirements with Washington State ambient air quality requirements. Next slide. As you can see here on the map, as highlighted in yellow, the ambient air boundary in the past had primarily run along the physical boundary of the Hanford site itself. Modeling done by Hanford would be based off of this boundary to ensure emissions were protective of human health and the environment as it related to the ambient air boundary requirements identified in the last slide. Under EPA policy, atmosphere over land owned or controlled by the stationary source may be excluded from the ambient air requirements. Next slide. So as progress on the Hanford site over the last few decades has had some unintended effects as it related to the ambient air boundary identified in the last slide, more public access for tours, the handing over of oversight of certain parts of the Hanford property, and other factors were cause for concern for ecology. Next slide. To address our concerns, Ecology and USDOE developed a memorandum of agreement outlining the new ambient air boundary as seen in purple, as well as establishing a buffer zone as a non-physical barrier to ensure accidental public access do not occur. As described earlier, the emissions modeling now would determine the dispersed concentration of emissions outside of the new boundary shown here in purple. All right, with that, I'll hand it over to Nina, the cleanup section manager.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name's Nina Menard, and I'm the cleanup section manager. And one of the projects in my section is environmental restoration that oversees the cleanup of soil and groundwater. One of our accomplishments this year had to do with groundwater in the 200 East area of the Central Plateau. As you guys all know, Hanford site's big. It encompasses about 581 square miles and is divided into generally two areas. One's called the River Corridor, which is along the Columbia River. The other one is the Central Plateau, which is up on the plateau and away from the river. So the Central Plateau is divided into east and west, and there are four operable units. And operable units are basically an administrative record of CERCLA so that we can address cleanup within an operable unit. We have 4 groundwater operable units and numerous source operable units, and then we have 1 deep VADOS operable unit. So the groundwater operable units in the Central Plateau, there are 2 of them in the 200 East area and 2 of them in the 200 West area. And the 200 East area also encompasses part of the operable unit is what migrates beyond the Central Plateau, and actually the groundwater could impact the Columbia River. It does go to the Columbia River here. Next slide, please. This shows you just a general graphic of where the 2 operable units in the East area, called 200 BP5 and 200 PO1. And you can see that the operable units are quite large for groundwater. Next one. So in the process of doing research in the groundwater and identifying contamination in the groundwater, it became apparent there were a couple pretty good plumes that was by the B complex, which is the B tank farms, B, BY, and BX, and also the C and the A and AX tank farms. The B complex has uranium and technetium 99 that are exceeding drinking water standards, and C and A and AX farm has technetium 99. There's also co-contaminants within this area: nitrate, cyanide, iodine 129, and tritium. These were not specifically addressed in the interim record of decision, but they are being remediated as co-contaminants through the 200 area West Pump and Treat Facility. This is important, and one of the reasons why it was not included as contaminants of concern in the IROD is because they're more pervasive and wider than where these other plumes were, and we wanted to be able to address these concentrated plumes before they would migrate further in the groundwater operable unit. Next slide, please. This just gives you a graphic, and I know it's kind of small, of the 200 West Pump and Treat Facility. And you can see how they have treatment for all the different contaminants. And once the groundwater is treated for all these different contaminants, it's re-injected back into the groundwater upstream of both some of the contamination in the 200 West area and the 200 East area. This just enables the water to be kind of pushed a little bit further towards the extraction wells that can extract the contaminated water and then treat it through the 200 West Pump and Treat facility. So we are like to give a shout out to both EPA and DOE for working with Ecology to become with this interim record of decision that was approved last year. It's a good accomplishment, and it just enables us to clean up the groundwater in a more timely fashion. As we go forth and other contamination could be identified in these operable units, then we will have a final record of decision that would address those areas. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you, Nina. And a huge thank you to all of our subject matter experts and management that's been on tonight's call for their presentations. And we appreciate you guys taking your time out of your evening to be a part of this event. And with that, we'll go ahead and move into our live Q&A session. We have a couple questions that were asked on WebEx so far. We can go ahead and go over those again. I know that we had some of them answered in the chat, but for those of them you who didn't see it on Facebook, we'll go ahead and ask them again, and we can get those answered as well. So we had the first question that came in from Susan was, have you lost critical skills with the loss of ecology staff who did not get vaccinated, and will that loss affect Ecology's ability to provide timely regulatory responses? And David, you did type a response, but would you want to hop on mic and share your response again?
Sure, yeah, and thank you, Susan, for the question. We did lose some talented team members for sure, and as we were anticipating them going off staff, we did create transition plans and have been able to continue the critical work associated with their positions, including regulatory response. So at this point in time, no, we haven't lost the ability for the regulatory response. It's part of the why we have such a push to get those recruitments filled and people back in the seats and up and trained, so that we can sustain it for so long before we start having to start rethinking those transition plans. So right now we're in good shape though.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. We had one question come in from Jerry on chat on WebEx, and Jerry asked, are slides available online? Jerry, yes, they will be. I'm going to put them up on the website tomorrow after the event, and I will send that, or I will share that link on our social media channels, and we will probably send out a kind of a recap on our email list distribution as well that shares the link to these slides. So we will put that up on our website tomorrow. Another question that came from Susan was, where did the 2 boxes of plutonium debris from PFP end up? Teresa, that was a question you did answer in the chat. Do you want to pop back on and answer that one again?
Yes. Hi, Susan. Those boxes are currently at CWC, the Central Waste Complex, awaiting shipment to WIP ultimately.
Perfect. Thank you, Teresa. And let me see if we have any other questions in so far. I'm not seeing any quite yet on. Oh, we do have one from Liz Matson on Facebook. And Liz asks, can you share any updates about the holistic negotiations and how often you are talking with the U.S. Department of Energy? And I think that'd be David. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be me. Yeah. Thanks, Liz. We actually met again yesterday. We've got some conceptual ideas on the table, and kind of trying to hammer out details on that to see if we have a good path forward or not. As far as how often we're meeting, we were meeting weekly. We're getting so far in the details now, it's every 2 to 3 weeks. Thanksgiving and Christmas, the holidays kind of hampered that a little bit, but we're trying to wrap them up very soon. That's probably as much real detail as I can give at the moment.
You're muted, Ryan.
2 years into COVID, and I'm still guilty of muting myself sometimes. Sorry, David. I was saying that Susan did ask a similar question on the WebEx chat, but you answered that question as well with Susan's question. We do have another question that came from Kelsey Shank on WebEx, and Kelsey asked, Are you expecting any major changes in Hanford's 2022 life cycle report compared to the 2019 report, and are you expecting it from DOE by the end of this month? And I'm not sure which one of you would best answer that question if we can.
Yeah, I can answer that. This is John Price. I'm actually the TPA project manager for the life cycle report. I would expect it'll change quite a bit just because the last report that we got was quite different from the previous one. And also DOE, I'm sure, has updated their cost estimates and schedules, just as work progresses and they learn new information. I think we're still expecting it from the Department of Energy the end of the month. I don't know if it will go to the public immediately. As I recall, EPA and Ecology get 2 weeks to look at it before it does go out to the public. And don't hold me to that, but that's my rough idea. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John. And I don't see any more questions yet on Facebook, but again, if anybody has any questions about tonight's presentation or just about Ecology's work at Hanford, or our role at Hanford, or just, any questions along those lines, feel free to put them into the Facebook chat on the live stream on Facebook, or if you're on the WebEx, you can put it on the Q&A box, or we also do have a chat function open on WebEx as well. Let me check and see if we have any other questions that have been asked live. If not, I do have a couple questions that were generated beforehand that we can ask while we're waiting. Actually, we do have one from Jerry. Let me pull this up. This message was from Jerry, and Jerry on WebEx asked, US DOE responded to HAB advice from 2000 distributed today in which US DOE defended the use of a time-sensitive response action when there was no release and doubt as to any threat of near-term release. Ecology noted that non-time critical response actions are preferred. If a time critical response is justified without a release, why not use that authority to remove waste from B109, which is leaking? And David, I think I'll kick that over to you. And thanks for the question. And you can see that question in the WebEx chat too if you need to see it again, David.
And I'm probably going to need to defer that to maybe John Price or somebody like that. It's got a little more detail into the weeds than what I know offhand. John, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. So I'm the Tri-Party Agreement Section Manager for Ecology, and the Tri-Party Agreement does have provisions for the regulatory agencies to ask DOE to submit proposals for expedited responses. That's definitely one of the tools in our toolbox. I think right now we're trying to figure out what is, the best technical approach. It's kind of pointless to ask DOE to submit a proposal if we don't have a good idea what that technical proposal should look like. So that's kind of my take on where we're at right now. And hopefully, David, that's consistent with where you think we're at.
All right, thank you, John. We have a question again from Liz on Facebook, and this one might be a question we could ask to the panel, all the presenters we've had on tonight. Are there any lessons learned from 2021 that you can share? And I guess we could start with David and Stephanie, and we can work our way down the presenters we have.
You said lessons learned in, I'm sorry, any particular context or just in general?
It looks like it's just saying, are there any lessons learned from 2021 that you can share? So I think that's more of a general kind of question.
All right. Well, in 2021, it continued to show that Department of Ecology and Nuclear Waste Program in general, we can continue our work from a remote operational perspective. We can continue to be productive and provide the oversight we need. We're learning how to do hybrid in-person and virtual meetings. I think virtual in a way has actually been able to expand the number of folks who can participate in public comment or in meetings and that kind of thing, but it also eliminates the face-to-face interaction that helps build relationships. And so, we're working hard trying to figure out how do we continue the relationship building and the camaraderie and really have those difficult decisions and discussions made in this virtual environment. And you start getting to where you're hiding behind your keyboard, and it's much easier to be a little bit less cordial using a keyboard in a video than maybe you would be in person. And so, you need to be conscious of that and be self-aware of how you're presenting yourself and how you're messaging, and also asking questions, maybe repeating back what you heard to make sure you heard it correctly. Those types of things, because you don't get all the body language that you would normally get. Don't necessarily get tone. And then what I've personally learned over the year that I've been here is, we're actually, as far as moving forward and overall cleanup globally on the site, there's probably 95% agreement on what needs to happen. There's disagreement or discussion around sequencing and timing. There's legal posturing that people want to preserve and standing they want to preserve. Sometimes that gets in the way of transparent and clear conversation and communication. But I'm actually encouraged to have the communications I am having, whether it's with stakeholder groups, the tribal nations, Department of Energy, EPA, Department of Health. There's so many people, the Clean Air Authority, there's just so many people involved in what goes on at Hanford. And realizing that everybody does have the same goal to get the site cleaned up, to get the waste treated, to get it disposed of appropriately, and do everything we can to define the right pathways to appropriate disposal. So those are probably my lessons learned in 2021. I don't know, Stephanie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see me on camera. It looks like you can't see me on video, but for me, as we mentioned earlier, we did lose some critical staff in 2021. And one of the biggest lessons learned I've learned is just it's so critical to have desk manuals for the specific jobs we have that are single point failures and planning for retirement and trying to document all of the historical knowledge. We have people that have been with the program for a very long time, and it's so critical that we try and document or transition all of the information that they have so we can prepare for the next generation. That's it, Ryan. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I think we can kick this question maybe over to Dan and Suzanne over in tank waste treatment. Suzanne, do you have any thoughts that you want to share? I see you're muted, Suzanne.
Yeah, I think people have done a good job covering it. I'm not sure I have anything to add.
Okay. Dan, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
No, I'm in agreement with what's been said, Ryan. Thank you.
Perfect. Teresa, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing really to add. I'd just highlight what David and Stephanie both said about increased communication in a time where we're still staying away from each other and making sure that we do a little bit more than what you would normally think is necessary to communicate adequately.
Perfect. Thanks, Teresa. And Nina, I saw your video pop on. Do you have any thoughts?
This has really been a learning experience with being in virtual meetings, and to add to what David said, some of what I've noticed is we've all had to be a little bit more politer because it's really hard to talk over the top of each other when we're all in the same, as we would have at times when we were in the same room. You can't really do that virtually. And so we've all had to learn to be patient and be a little bit more polite with each other. And it's kind of eliminated side conversations, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. One of the things that I really miss is not coming across somebody in the hallway and having those casual conversations where a lot of things get discussed and get shared. And now you have to be more intentional in reaching out to not only your staff members, but also to DOE and the contractors to be able to have those intentional conversations. That's about it. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Nina. And John, you got anything else that you want to add?
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing I really missed the last couple of years is personal interaction with, the public. I've enjoyed going down the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board and, having interactions with the board members during their meeting and, after the meetings. The Hanford Advisory Board, kind of along the lines that Nina mentioned, it was great to have hallway conversations with advisory board members. I miss going to public meetings in public, in person, and having questions face to face. And I think, public meetings are a great way for ecology to really, kind of sharpen our tools. They make us get our act together before we go to those public meetings to make sure we have well thought out proposals. And so I'm looking forward to reinventing public involvement again as things open up. And I think that falls in your bailiwick, Ryan.
Thanks, John. And I think rounding out this question, Eddie, do you have any other thoughts? And then we can go on to some of the other questions.
No, coming back to ecology here in 2021 in April, I didn't really have the telework experience that others have experienced throughout 2020. So just being a part of an effective team here at Ecology with this telework environment was the lesson learned for me, and I'm looking forward to continuing that here in 2022.
Perfect. Thank you, Eddie. And thank you everyone for your responses there. And thanks for the great question, Liz. So we have a couple more questions that came in on Facebook and on WebEx. I think we can tackle some of the PFP ones first. So I might put you on the spot a bit, Teresa. This first PFP question came from Susan, and Susan asks, does Ecology have any concerns about contamination, chemical and radiological, under and around the PFP and adjoining buildings and pits?
Yeah, so there are a number of operable units in the PFP areas. So the soil waste sites that are adjacent and underlying PFP fall into primarily 200 WA1 and the PW 136 operable units. The RIFS for 200 WA1 is anticipated. EPA has been working with DOE on that for quite some time. So, we do expect a full investigation to occur of those soil waste sites. As far as, current configuration of the facility, the clean soil cap and fixative and all of that, we have no concerns about, spread of contamination from that at this point in time. But certainly investigation of the soil waste sites is expected.
Perfect. And our next question comes from Dan Solitz on Facebook. And Dan asks, has a decision been made as to how the PFP site will be revegetated, I think is what you meant to spell?
No, the revegetation will occur after the soil operable units are investigated and a ROD and any cleanup actions that need to occur in that area have been decided on. That's a good question.
Awesome, thanks. And I think that's the PFP questions we had. This next question comes from Kelsey on WebEx, and Kelsey asks, does Ecology have a position on the high-level waste interpretation in general? Not site specific, just in general, and with DOE finding their decision is aligned with the Blue Ribbon Commission from 2012. And I know we have a couple of people that might be able to address that one, so I'm not sure if David, you want to direct the question or?
I'll start, and then anybody who wants to fill in can. As far as the state of Washington still maintains their legal position that the high-level waste interpretation is the equivalent of rulemaking, and that it didn't follow the process to do that. As far as recategorizing high-level waste itself, there's already processes to do that within current regulations. Folks are generally in agreement that up to 90% of the waste on the Hanford site could be reclassified as something other than high-level waste. And the biggest concern for the state of Washington is the interpretation takes out all that oversight and conversation, not just the state, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and others that make sure there's some public confidence in what the reclassification is of that waste as things move forward. And I'm not totally up to speed on the Blue Ribbon Commission from 2012. I read a little bit on it, but maybe somebody else can fill in anything about the alignment with the Blue Ribbon Commission.
this is Suzanne Dahl. So the Blue Ribbon Commission was done by the federal government to sort of look at alternative ways to think about how to do a deep geologic disposal site and other that given that Yucca Mountain was canceled. And one of the things that the Blue Ribbon Commission really found as they went around and did all these various interviews and had public meetings was that why was say WIP, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, successful in New Mexico, and why was Yucca Mountain not successful in Nevada? And there's a bunch of reasons, but from one of the things that the Blue Ribbon Commission looked at is that at WIP there was a lot more in New Mexico. There was a lot more communication with local groups, tribal groups, and state authorities, and those folks were involved in the decision making to site it, how to regulate it, how to permit it, and so one of the things that the Blue Ribbon Commission walked away with in their report is in the future, if you're going to do some kind of siting of something like that in the future, that it really might be best if you involved early on all of the affected stakeholder groups and government groups and community groups that might be around a facility like that.
So thank you, David and Suzanne, for the answer there. I'm looking on WebEx. I'm not seeing any more questions there yet. We do have one more on Facebook. So if anybody else has any last questions, feel free to put them into the either chat on whatever stream you're on now. But this last question I'm seeing is coming from Liz again, and Liz asks, what are some of the cleanup issues the agencies and the public will be grappling with in the coming year? Big picture.
Get that to my section managers who have much more intimate involvement in that kind of thing. Who wants to go first?
This is Suzanne, and one of the things that I think is going to be a big deal is going through the cold and hot commissioning in 22, 23, and the start of 24 for the low activity vitrification plant, and going through the demonstration testing where the facility is started on simulant and the off-gas systems are looked at to see that everything is destroyed before it goes out the stack in a way that is protective of human health and the environment. So that's a lot of technical field work and technical review of data, and something that I would think that the public would be very interested in.
I'll go next. So I have kind of a wide area. Part of the two main projects within the cleanup section is the DSTs, SSTs, and the evaporator. And I think you guys are all aware of the fact that we have two SSTs that are leaking, and addressing those and addressing them in a timely fashion will probably be one of our biggest challenges in this next year. And we also have AY102, which is fairly much empty since it's a leaking DST, the first leaking DST. But DOE needs to come forth and have a plan for final closure of that tank. And so that's another issue we'll be addressing in this next year. For the soil and groundwater, a lot of our work has been focused on the Central Plateau. And one of the things that we are preparing to work with DOE on is a focused feasibility study for the shallow RTD, remove, treat, and dispose soil sites that will provide contaminated soil to fill in the areas at ERDF where debris is being disposed of, contaminated debris from the buildings that are being torn down. So those are some of the areas that are really a challenge in this next year that we hope to make good progress on. Over.
I'll jump in here, Ryan. So we had a question earlier about holistic negotiations. We're entering our 4th calendar year of negotiations. So I hope that we're very close to the end of a tentative agreement with the Department of Energy. Assuming we get there, I think there's 2 aspects that are going to be really big. One is public involvement. When we did the original tank waste settlement agreement in 2010, we had regional public meetings. I don't know exactly how we'll pull that off. It depends on, how the COVID restrictions go. The other aspect of it is, regardless of public involvement, whatever we agree on, it's going to be about treating the tank waste and retrieving single shell tanks. And those are hugely, interesting subjects with, people having a lot of opinions on them. So I think, we're going to have just a lot of focus on those. Thanks.
All right, I think we hit all the section managers there, and David shared a couple thoughts at the beginning. Stephanie, did you have anything you wanted to add on? Oh, sorry, Eddie. Oh my gosh, Eddie, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing related to cleanup actions across the site over the next few years, but we have quite a bit of support as it relates to permits for direct feed, low activity waste treatment when it comes to the construction that's going on at the liquid effluent retention facility, as well as the effluent treatment facility, whether it's under RCRA, air permitting, or the wastewater discharge permits. We got a lot of work to do over the next few years as it relates to that. So.
Awesome, thanks, Eddie. And I guess rounding out that question, Stephanie, did you have anything that you wanted to add from your management perspective?
I would just echo what David said at the very beginning. This year is going to be a really big year for permitting across the program, including for the Hanford site-wide Revision 9 renewal. And that will include getting the single shell tanks and double shell tanks into the permit, which does involve closure of active units that are managing waste. So it is moving the cleanup forward in a way. So very much looking forward to going out for public comment with that permit again.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I think our questions now are about done. We have one more that came in. This one comes from Dan on Facebook. And Dan just asked, what is the status of the Testbed Initiative? And I guess we could probably answer that from Ecology's perspective, but who would want to tackle that one?
Well, I can start, and then if one of the others who are a little closer to it want to fill in, they sure can. Ecology, we're supportive of the pilot project with the Testbed Initiative. We're on the phase 2 portion of it. We're very interested to learn from this portion of it whether the defined pathways that are intended to be used can actually be used and follow the regulatory process to do so. It's going to require coordination with a different region of EPA. It's going to require coordination with different states. And, we'd love to see that project completed and analyze the results from that. So, getting that waste treated off-site and disposed of appropriately is really important to us. And TBI is one of those potential methods to do that. So we're very interested in the results. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that.
All right, not hearing anything with that. So I'm checking Facebook and WebEx again. I'm not seeing any more questions. If for some reason I did miss a question, no, it wasn't intentional, and feel free to send it to our email at hanford@ecy.wa.gov. I'm pretty sure I got them all because I went through the questions like 6 times. But of course, if you have any other questions at any time about our work at Hanford, feel free to, again, email us or message us on Facebook, and we are happy to answer them. But I guess with that, we can go ahead and round out the event. I want to thank all of our presenters and attendees for hopping on tonight. It's always great to have everybody on, especially on a weeknight. We appreciate you taking your time out of your day to join us. So with that, I will remind everybody that this event has been recorded. It will be available up on Facebook soon after, with usually Facebook buffers it within an hour or so you can watch it right away if you want to. I will put it up on the Ecology, the Washington Department of Ecology YouTube channel tomorrow as well. And like I mentioned earlier, to the question that we got, for the slides from tonight's presentation, I will put those up on our Ecology website, and that will also be shared on our social media for the link, as well as we'll send out an email list to our Hanford info list. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in a copy of the slides that we shared tonight, which also includes that PFP link that we shared earlier for the time-lapse video. But with that, this is typically about the time of the night where we ask David and Stephanie if they have any parting thoughts, or our presenters if they have any parting thoughts. We have a lot of presenters on tonight, so I'll just defer to David and Stephanie if they have any parting thoughts, and then I'll share one final little bit, and we can call it a night. But Dave and Stephanie, do you guys have any kind of parting thoughts before we close?
Just same as you. Thanks for those who, you could choose to do anything and you're here listening to us or watching this video. So thank you for that. And I'm really encouraged by, I've been there a year and the team we have is just sensational. The interest in the site is fantastic. There are a lot of differing opinions, but we listen and hear them all and then try to apply them to the work in the site. So I just appreciate everyone's interest in the work we do and the work that gets done by this team.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And Stephanie, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to add to?
Nope, I'll just echo what you and David said. Thank you to everyone who took time to join us tonight.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, David. And I'll mention one comment I saw from Susan on here where she said, I look forward to seeing you in person at the HAB meetings in the near future. I certainly hope so too, Susan. We love seeing everybody in person. And that's something we definitely miss. So hopefully, protocols will allow us to in the future. But with that, I will remind everybody our next event we're planning for February. It's going to actually kind of take a dive back into history and look at the Ice Age geology of the Hanford site area. That'll be a pretty exciting event. We're going to have a guest presenter on named Bruce Bjornstead. And with that, stay tuned for that. We hope to have some information on that event next week. And then up in March, we'll have an event that kind of focuses back on some Hanford cleanup specific topics. But again, thank you everybody for attending and have a great night.